And so these two scriptural texts lay the foundation for the origin and the purpose and how the Muslims or these Islamic people are going to behave. Now, first we know that they're Abraham's son. God said He's going to make them a great nation, and also He says that every man is going to be their enemy. They're going to be wild, etc. And it seems as if over the time, humans have been trying to sort of modernize them or bring them into a modernity. But they have their own modernity, they have their own reality, they have their own life. Now, this Islamic problem started way back after the Second World War. Now, the Jews were scattered, and going into the Middle East. I don't know whose suggestion it was or whatever, but this seemed to have started fermenting and setting up this problem that has matured right now, and it's going to be, what it seems going to bring down the West. Now, first I must say that the West seemed to have adapted the Judeo-Christian philosophy in that life is very precious and special. And so you should kill generally and others, and you shouldn't kill yourself. But although these Muslims are Abraham's son, and they believe that there's one God and Jesus is his prophet, they have a different philosophy on life. Now, they try to motivate it by saying, when you go to heaven, you're going to have a virgin for your wife or your husband or whatever. And this seems to motivate them. But they're very suicidal. Not in the sense that they're crazy or whatever, but they will kill themselves to kill you. And this is the recipe that the enemy has chosen, and this is why he probably put Israel in the Middle East, and this is why he's making the West right now go after these Islamists. The type of technology the West has, these nuclear bombs and these high guns and these bad planes and ships and so on, it's very unlikely that anybody could beat them, in a war. But when they come against the Islamists, or these folks in the Middle East, is going to be a different game. Now, the strategy is this, what I've seen they used in Iraq and other places. They fight you when they're ready. You spend billions of dollars a day by deploying this big bomb and these 100 endless men or whatever. And that outlay is not for a long term, for 50 years or 100 years. That's just short term. The economies in these countries would require that sort of outlay to be directed into other areas, housing, employment, the environment, etc. So that the West can't spend that kind of billions of dollars on ending. And so what the Muslims do, they choose when to fight. They're farmers, they don't put on army clothes, and they're just chilling. They're just like in Vietnam, same kind of Eastern philosophy, suicidal. And so they'll choose when to fight, and they're not fighting on your terms, so that they could go on like this for the next 100 years. We saw in the past they had 30-year wars and 10-year wars and so on. When you go in the Middle East, there you have to say, well, I'm going here for 100 years, and the spending I'm going to be putting out right now is going to go on forever. We saw where the Soviet Union went into Afghanistan. And I think Hannibal and some other people in the past, even Napoleon, went down into the Middle East, and they end up, into serious problems. Crusades by the Catholic Church and others, they were dismal failures. As I said, if you wanted to go down there to capture something, maybe a treasure, and it will require 1,000 men to have that, you have to work with 100,000, because in going in you have to fight your way through all these Muslim territories. You fight to get the treasure, and then you have to fight your way out, and sometimes your treasure don't get out until some other area gets it. And even if you do, with the 100,000, just 5,000 might come back home, or 500, whatever, with the treasure. And the question is, was it worth it? So what the Catholic Church and others have done today is tell these guys, look, man, we went in there with horse and camel and cavalry, whatever. Now you have aircraft carriers, you have helicopters, you have all this kind of stuff. It would be easier. You could make the crusade work. But you know what? God seems to be protecting these folks, because He's going to make them a great nation, which means that nobody is going to be able to prevent it from happening. All right. And He also says that every man is going to be their enemy, and so on. So bottom line is this: when you go in there with your superpower and your big stuff, I wonder if this is what caused the Soviet Union really to collapse. I'm not sure. But when you go in there with your big power and all that stuff, and they're fighting you when they want, and they're going on for 100 years, you can get bankrupt right in there, and you have to leave and march down the road. According to the Afghan people, there's this Balazir here, there's Hannibal march down, and all them who come here have to march down here and get out. And it's hostile, it's like the Tet offensive. The fellas that you heal shooting at you, it's not an easy situation. So what I was suggesting is this, man: leave these people alone. They're not interested in your modernity. They have their own way of doing things in their own life. And the God scripture says they're going to be every man's enemy. In other words, they're going to be indomitable. And what God has done, He has elected or chosen some crazies amongst them to run the show. And He's going to cut off head and do all this stuff. And we saying in the West, oh, look at that. We want to go in and make life easier for them. But they can give you grief. I remember warning some folks that this spring revolution, that spring whatever spring that started in Tunisia, it's not about democracy and capitalism, it's about chaos. And when you take away the strong man, every day is some demonstration in the street. Egypt was almost on the verge of collapse. They got rid of Hosni Mubarak, but guess what? They brought back the army strongman, and everybody is stabilized, everybody's happy. When a strong man is out there, people feel secured and they feel happy and everything goes well. You put in an easy friend with democracy and all that, rule of law and whatever, court and due process and whatever, and so on. It's not going to work. So I'm suggesting to these folks, man, if you really want to survive, if you want your civilization to really continue and you want to be happy, leave the Middle East alone, because you go in there, these guys are going to be suiciding you. They're going to fight when they want. Your troops are going to know who's enemy. And it's going to be such chagrin and such mental torture that you're going to end up with all kind of mental problems. And you're not only going to spend a whole bunch of money, in thin air, you won't achieve your objectives, and your men going to come back with a whole bunch of medical problems. And I see now France is trying to get everybody back into the Middle East. I don't understand what's the big grand jaw in getting into Syria. I think the enemy knows very well that something. We see this is something tricky. It's not only that the Muslims might be that valiant and smart and whatever, but the enemy who really, really wants to rule the world, okay? He's infiltrated all these governments, and he knows the secrets, so that he will tell them, the Muslims what to do and whatever, what to do, and guide them, and they're going to succeed. They're going to thwart your greatest technological advance. They're going to affect stuff, but the scripture says that the enemy, the same guy that pushing all this stuff and causing all this chaos and all this terror in the world, he thinks that he's going to take over the world and everybody hand over the sovereignty to him. But you know what scripture says? He can rule just for 1 hour. 1 hour, that is about 16 days. Because an hour is a 24th of a day. And in that context, the day was being for a year. So 1 hour is 1/24th of a year, which is almost 15, 16 days. And the guy's going to realize he's a fraud, and they're going to kill him. But then, of course, they would have already committed the unpardonable sin. The battle for Armageddon would have already started, because they won't only lose out to the Muslims, but they're going to start persecuting the Christians, God's children. And this is what this whole thing is about. So before you go into the Middle East, think of it carefully. Do you want to spend the next 100 years over there? Do you want your people to come back traumatized? No, I'm not no Muslim lover or nothing like that. I'm just telling you what the information is, man. If you want to think so long with you, man, I can't stop you from thinking, but I'm just telling you what the facts are. And it's like your son. You tell son you're going to get you a nice little woman and you have some kids, and you're going to leave my place and go about your business saying, no, I love you, daddy. I'm going to stay home. I'm going to be... I say, okay, son, we don't have this discussion no more. And a couple of years, he's gonna slip away and go on, and then the next day bringing him grandchildren and so on. This is all I'm doing. I'm just telling you what the scripture says, man. And whether you want to fight it or not, don't fight me, fight God, because He explained this thing. And I'm just telling you what the end game is going to be. So they found a nice way to get into the Middle East, put Israel in there. You want to protect Israel. There's going to be no peace ever. And it seems to me that is the genesis of this whole Eastern Muslim war and so forth. Israel is there to stay. The problem is going to be forever. So I make your day, man. I'm just watching how things go, and I don't care one way or another. I just tell you how it looks to me. Okay.